The rivalry is as big as it gets.
It's almost part of the DNA.
It's everything in Irish rugby.
It's one of the biggest derbies in European rugby.
If you don't win, it's not a rivalry.
In terms of interprovincial games, there's no tougher games, and you get a real sense of that rivalry when you know what it means to supporters. And you know my experiences of people from Cork or Limerick living in Dublin, working in Dublin, and how much it means to them, you know, for Munster to do well in these big games.
I think it means everything to those teams, and it means an awful lot to me as well. I think it's the biggest derby in the league. You know, the quality I think that both teams have shown over the last, sort of 15 seasons means that's why it's been such a good derby. There are never many fallow years when one team isn't firing.
When it comes to Munster, it's one of those situations where it is about taking on, what we assume will be a full-strength Leinster side and beating them. Because if you don't win, it's not really a rivalry outside of a sort of a local scuffle between teams who happen to be near each other.
There is a huge amount that goes into this. I think when the game was in the advent of professionalism, there's an awful lot more club involvement, and that added another layer of spice. And these games were traditionally an audition for an Irish team. So I think that's kind of poetic, because this game is definitely an Irish audition.
I think even without crowds at the moment, it's the one that excites these bunches of players the most. It feels like a trial this week especially, but it's always that. And even though times have changed, we've seen more player movement, it still means a hell of a lot to these guys involved.
Ronan O'Gara, you don't even have to finish that. It's Ronan O'Gara encapsulates that derby for me. I know he's an outside half, and but the aggression and competitiveness that he played with every single match in every game he played. So Ronan O'Gara, just without a doubt.
It's got to be Ronan O'Gara. When I think of these games, I think of him, good and bad for Munster. The good being 2006, that moment where he hands off Malcolm O'Kelly, an unexpected, brilliant moment. On the flip side, you have 2009, where you think of Johnny Sexton standing over him after that Gordon Darcy try. You think of Brian O'Driscoll picking off Ronan O'Gara's pass and going the length of the field to really seal the deal on what was a momentous moment in this rivalry. It was the kind of flipping of everything on its head, and Leinster making that statement and going on to their European glory.
You have definitely Paulie, Nick Galway, O'Gara, those kind of players were always the most vocal, and they were the ones that were driving the tempo and driving almost that sheer hate towards us. And then the reciprocals from our side. I shared a dressing room with Trevor Brennan for so many years, and he loved this match, absolutely loved it. Shane Jennings as well, another guy who it mattered more than the result. It was about beating. And then more recently, again, Johnny Sexton. Probably something about number 10s, definitely being the guys.
One guy who I associate very much with this game is Dennis Leamy. How strong he was, how effective he was in those games, but how much he was able to affect the mentality of the opposition as well.
I think Mick Galway is a guy, he stands out. I first came into the setup, and to hear a guy speak and to get so emotional before matches, and in particular these interprovincial games and what it really meant to him, and to see tears in this guy's eyes, in a change room before he went out into do battle against the likes of Leinster, was incredibly powerful, and something that stays with me to this day.
Without a doubt, Brian O'Driscoll, one of the greatest players of all time. To me, he's the greatest outside centre of all time.
Munster would love a Mick Owen or a Paul Connell in the second row this weekend. That would really, really add a new dimension to what they have. I think from a Leinster perspective, a guy whose actions spoke way louder than anything he could ever say. Slotting Mr. O'Driscoll into 13 wouldn't be a bad shout for Leinster this weekend.
I'd love to see Felipe Contepomi out there. I know he's going to be in the coach's box, but I'm always intrigued by how the players from outside Ireland come in and massively embrace this rivalry. Often they're the ones who push it most. And I think Contepomi was one of the first guys who really did that. He was fiery, he really got stuck in, he appreciated what it meant to Irish rugby, as well as all the brilliant moments of creativity and flair that he brought.
You'd love the likes of Peter Clohessy to take the field. I think just, you probably wouldn't have seen him in the gym too often. A guy who would have enjoyed a couple of cigarettes beforehand and after a game, but a guy, when he hit the field, he is a guy you wanted to go into battle with. And I'll never forget matches playing alongside him and the raw emotion and the physicality that he brought to the occasion. For me, 2006 in that semi-final at Lansdowne Road against Leinster.
The pressure, the tension, the expectation that was building up about that game in the weeks beforehand was not something that we were used to seeing in Irish provincial rugby.
I think losing to Munster in the 05-06 season was very, very humbling, and it showed the chasm between the two teams at the time.
It just seemed like there was a feeling of unending momentum about Munster at that time.
I think the season that we had going on to win in Europe meant so much to the team and the squad, and I think as a result of the guys that had been involved in the setup for a number of years, going back to that 98 season, and they were part of that success even though they didn't get to take the field. But 2006, that win, seeing Lansdowne Road completely red, is a memory that will never ever leave me.
That's one of the ones that, had we not gone on and delivered what we did deliver, that would probably be something, a cross I carry around the place.
That defeat for Leinster in that game brought them to the stage where they were able to, repeat it in 2009, to go back into the same situation, a semi-final against Munster, and then went to win that game so dominantly, and then to go on, I suppose, and tip the balance of power.
2009 in Croke Park was just an incredible occasion. I'll never forget being there, the colour, the volume, but also the performance that Leinster delivered in completely turning the rivalry on its head. Munster had won their 2 European titles, but Leinster took control of the rivalry that day. Their brilliant, talented backs were superb in scoring tries through Darcy, Luke Fitzgerald, you think of his feet, but also up front where they muscled up and took on those Munster strengths and bettered them. And it was a real change of the guard, and really Leinster haven't looked back.